Hey, this is Dr. Glenn Livingston, and I very much appreciate your time and attention to learn about how you might get paid for your love of helping others. And I won't beat around the bush. This is about coaching, which is kind of an exciting industry which has very few barriers to entry because you don't necessarily need a background in psychology or counseling. You can refer to other people. Requires very little money to start. You need an internet connection and a telephone. You can work with clients from all around the world. Because you are the product, there really aren't any startup costs like inventory or franchise fees, or just compare this with some of the costs of other traditional businesses. And so what I did today is I got a lay person who is one of the most successful coaches that I know, has literally made a fortune in coaching, has done literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of sessions, also sells CDs and books and ebooks on the topic. He actually serves a population of mental health supporters with lay coaching systems. And his name is David Oliver. And David, how are you today?
Good, I'm doing great, Glenn. Thanks for having me today.
I'm really excited to have you here. David, is what I just said true? In your experience, did you have any trouble building a coaching business given that you didn't have a background in psychology or counseling or human resources or anything like that?
If I could take it back even 10 years before that, maybe 15 years, a couple things. I was coached from people. So I was coached, I played football, I wrestled. What I learned over those years in high school and college and stuff, there were some coaches that were amazing that never even really played the game. They were just very good. They were very good at what they did. And some of these folks, I remember there's a guy who coached on baseball. When I asked, they call it a limited career. And, the guy played like his freshman and sophomore year in high school, and he was a great coach in baseball. So I guess that kind of stuck in my head. And I've been coached by a lot of great people that, like, there are no limitations, really. It's all in your own head. And I've naturally just seen the people who are doing coaching on this mass scale. You look at Oprah and even Dr. Phil. Even though he's a doctor, he's coaching people on weight loss, which he was heavy. And it didn't matter that he wasn't a doctor specifically for weight loss. You look at Oprah. You look at some of these self-help individuals. If you really look at their background, the Men Are From Mars guy, these aren't people that went to school for these things, that had a million degrees.
Even Tony Robbins, and I'm not saying he's the greatest or the worst or anything like that, but even Tony Robbins, if you listen to his backstory, the way he credentializes himself is that he wasn't happy with his life, and he sat down and he read like 700 books, and he figured this all out. And then he got all these great results, and this is what happened. It's not like he went out and had a PhD in psychology or counseling or was part of a large coaching organization or anything like that. He just kind of got up and said, hey, I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing. I did it for myself and I can do it for you.
Right. And I think that's so important. The first thing that people have to beat into their heads and they have to keep telling themselves is, like, there are no limits. I don't need to have someone bless me. I don't need to have someone, I don't mean in the religious sense. I don't need somebody else to tell me I can do it. Reality is, what I find when you're on the front lines, like I'm in mental health, so I've done a lot of stuff in network marketing. You learn on the job. You learn as you're going. You have this foundational base that you learn from, and then from there, you learn as you're doing it. And that's where you get your experience and stuff like that. So, like in my case, I didn't need to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist to be a coach. And in my market, people were looking for that because they kind of had it with dealing with psychiatrists and stuff. They wanted someone who knew what they were going through. They could tell them the ins and outs of how to deal with loved ones with serious mental illnesses and what to do. So that really worked to my advantage. And I can look across the board, right? So you look at individuals that now coach people on fighting and self-defense. Some of them lived in bad neighborhoods, and that's what they're doing. You look at people coaching people into the Amazon. I know that sounds crazy, but I met a guy doing that. People coaching people how to climb 14,000-foot mountains. When you talk to these people, they were regular people who just had a passion for something, and they decided to turn it in a way and make money.
Right. Gosh, I have a whole bunch of things coming on what you're talking about so far, and then I want to ask you a specific question. I think we both wholeheartedly agree that people tend to be their own worst enemies and place the worst limitations on themselves, and a lot of the best coaches that we know really come out of a lay background without any necessarily professional training. We run a training and certification academy, and we want to help people get trained and credentialed with us. And they always ask me, well, is it legally required that I get certified? And the answer to that is no. It's not legally required. At least I haven't come across one in my own legal research, but you should consult an attorney because obviously I'm not an attorney and this is not legal advice. There are laws that require that you can document your competence in whatever profession you choose to advertise to the public. Getting certified and trained, with a credible organization like ours is one way that you might want to document your competence. But it's not the only way that you can document your competence, and there are certainly no laws that require you to get a certification if you want to be a coach. Similarly, there are no government agencies that back up any particular coaching school or anything like that. There really is no state accreditation, anything like that. This is really a wide open field, which makes it possible for anyone to enter it. The thing that I wanted to ask you about, which you might have glossed over a little bit, was you jumped from having been coached in sports and athletics to doing a type of talking coaching. Like the kind of coaching that you're doing with supporters of people that have serious mental health issues and serious mental health diagnoses. First of all, you never tell people, hey, come to my coaching, don't see a psychiatrist, don't see a psychologist. You actually do it in addition to, and as a matter of fact, a lot of your coaching is to help them be okay about finding the right one and complying with that. This is all talking. You're not getting your clients out on the football field. You're not getting your clients to go to the weightlifting gym or go to the Amazon or anything like that. This is a very specific problem in life, which you have observations and experience about, and you've gone out there, gotten the word out, solicited people who are having problems with family members or loved ones who have these serious diagnoses, and said, hey, let's talk about it and I can help you. And I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about that leap? How did you go from the experience in sports coaching and how good that was for you to talk coaching?
Basically what happened was I had coaches, and to sum up, they were very motivational. They were very tough. They'd yell at you. They had a basic set of principles that they created, and that's what made them win, and then they would just keep beating it into your head. So after I helped my mom with her situation with bipolar disorder, I wrote a book on it, and I want people to understand that it had really nothing to do with the book. I just wrote a book on it. When I mean write a book, let me explain so you don't think the thing, oh, he wrote a book and it's in Barnes & Noble. I put together an outline and some thoughts, so to speak, on what it took to help my mom get well. That's what I did. And I put it in a Microsoft Word document, and I put a title in 24-point font that said The Bipolar Supporter Manual, and put my name. And that's what I call the book. It was an ebook, and I had some people interested, and they said, oh, I want to talk to you one-on-one. I thought it was, oh, well, that's great. And I said, okay. So I started talking to people, and I started realizing that, these people have absolutely no idea what they're doing. They literally have no clue. And they reminded me of timid football players that need a coach is going to say, come on, let's go. We can win. You're not a loser. Let's go,
Interesting.
That's what these people needed. More than anything, they were looking for someone to say, my loved one needs to go to a psychiatrist. They've been walking around I kind of think that Jenny needs to go to a psychiatrist, but I'm not really sure. So they get on the phone with me. So this is the way my initial coaching sessions went in the beginning. So here I am, right? I didn't even know what I was going to do. So I just knew I had a certain set of principles that worked for my mom. They made complete sense. She had to go to a psychiatrist. We had to find a good psychiatrist. She had to listen to what the psychiatrist said. The psychiatrist was going to tell her take medication. She needed to do that. If she didn't do that, then I wasn't going to talk to her ever again. And she needed to do a couple other things, and that she'd most likely be fine over time. Very, very simple stuff. So when I got on with my first coaching sessions with people, I said, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist. And they said, oh, no, I understand that. I said, but I'm going to tell you what some of the keys to success are. And then I'm going to tell you that you need to get moving. So they would ask, I'd say, okay, tell me your situation. This is how our calls are. Well, and then it would be some long, rambling story, which I'd cut off. Well, I met Jimmy 19 years ago, and then we found out 16 years ago he had bipolar. He did this, and then he quit his job, and he robbed a bank, and he flipped over a car, and he drugs out, blah, blah. And I'd say, all right, that's enough. Done. I got it. Because I already heard the same story. And I said, well, what did you do to get this better? And there would be some rambling. Well, we sort of, he doesn't really want to go for medication. Oh, doctors, they just want to medicate him. And this is how our sessions would be. I'd say, let me ask you a question. Jimmy threw a phone at you the other day. What do you think Jimmy needs? You think he needs a hug? You tell me, what does Jimmy need? He needs either restraint or he needs medication. Well, yeah, you're kind of right. And I said, now with your timid attitude, do you think you're contributing to the problem? And they're like, well, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you don't even think Jimmy should go to the psychiatrist. That's crazy. That's literally crazy. Jimmy has a reason to be crazy. He's not on medication. What's your excuse? And we would have these sessions, and then by the end, I'm beating people up a little bit. And at the end, they're like, you know what? You're right. I need to go find a doctor. You know what? And we can afford a doctor. You know what? And I'm not going to take Jimmy throwing the phone at me every other week. That's crazy. You know what? I'm going to tell Jimmy, you know what? You need to get your act together. We're going to the psychiatrist or I'm done. And a lot of my talks were, let me ask you a question. How long have you been supporting your loved one? 14 years? Okay, great. So you would have what I call as a losing team. For 14 years, in my mind, your whole management style, you're the coach and you've been losing for 14 years. Do you think you need to be doing more of the same? What do you mean? Well, if you had another 14 years to make it 28 years, do you think Jimmy would get any better? Well, no. So then you need to do something different. So you need to take action today. And part of the action I would tell people is we need to find a great psychiatrist. That is the key to success. And then we need to understand that psychiatrists are helpful. We need to give them all the information they need about Jimmy so they can make an informed decision about his diagnosis and his treatment. And then we need to make sure Jimmy complies. And we're not going to enable Jimmy. If Jimmy won't cooperate and says, oh, I won't take these meds, then you know what? You're going to have to walk away. Because you've already tried it for 14 years and it hasn't worked. Just like a football team tries the same plays and they keep losing for 14 years and wondering why they're not doing well.
So, David, I want to underscore some of the things that you say. I want to template them so that maybe some people are listening and saying, well, this sounds terrific, but I'm not really an expert in bipolar illness, or I'm not really an expert in mental health.
Let's talk about that. Great.
Yeah. Essentially what you did, and this is what most good coaches have in common, you had a desire to share and spare. That's why you wrote that ebook to start with. You had this experience. You had some success. It was a very painful thing in your life. You really had figured out a couple of principles that worked, and you looked around you and you said, well, why isn't everybody doing this? And why isn't anybody telling you to do this? You kind of picked this one problem, you went after it and said, I'm going to share my experience and try to spare others from the pain that I've been through. And so that's the question I want everybody in the audience to be asking themselves is, what is it that I've experienced that I've really solved in my life? I mean, maybe I'm not successful in this or not successful in that, but there's something that I really know how to do, that I've really solved. And why do I think that is? And how can I spare others from going through that? How could I do that? The other piece of what you did is you picked a very specific problem. And I think that most potential coaches overwhelm themselves in thinking about how in the world am I ever going to get clients? How am I going to get good at being to coach people? There's such a world of different problems that anybody can come to me with. And they don't realize that it's actually much more effective to pick a very specific problem and go after that specific problem. Because like you said, you'd heard the story 1,000 times before, right? The other impact of doing that is when you're approaching the same problem over and over again, you get confident a lot more quickly. And it's really confidence that I think builds a coach's practice in the long run, because if you're confident that you can give clients the solution to the problem that's ailing them, and you've heard the same stories over and over again, and you know you're going to be able to keep them long enough for them to achieve the results, well, at a certain critical volume, there's going to be people that notice the results that you're providing, and they're going to talk to other people about it, and you start to get referrals. And I don't mean to imply that this is the only way to get the word out, and I wouldn't want you to rely on referrals alone as, you know, from your clients alone as the way to build your practice, because you do need to build a critical mass. But ultimately, sharing your experience, sparing others from the problem, and picking that specific problem to go after are two very critical components of a successful coaching practice. So would you agree? Do you think there's something else that I missed in your story that would help people understand how they could apply their life experience and what they want to help people with?
No, that's exactly it. And it's the same thing. So someone might say, you know, people looking for a way out instead of a way in. And what I mean by that, and this is part of coaching, people looking for the reason they can't do this are going to say, oh, I don't have a mom with bipolar, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do that, and I don't know mental health. So let's talk about coaches for anything.
David, you know what? In a few days after people get this audio, I'm going to send them a free ebook called 101 Real Coaching Niches. And what we did is we had a researcher go out and find areas that real coaches were successfully working in, and she wrote up exactly what they're doing, who they're serving, how it's going. And so here are just some examples that you might not think of. There's academic coaching, you know, helping parents whose kids might not be getting the best grades, want to get into college, or helping students themselves, helping college students or graduate students to do better. There's diabetes coaching, there's life goals coaching, there's nursing coaching, helping nurses to develop their careers, there's self-esteem coaching, there's relationship coaching, there's divorce coaching, there's family coaching, ethics coaching, end-of-life coaching, adoption coaching, artist coaching, conflict coaching, your heart's desire coaching, personal power coaching, women's empowerment coaching, men's empowerment coaching, coaching entrepreneurs, coaching people who own dogs and are having trouble with the dogs or a specific breed of dogs. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. Really, whatever life area is of most interest to you, where you feel the most passion, that's probably where you should start. And the other thing I'll say is that you don't have to marry a coaching niche. You don't have to say, oh my God, I can't choose because I'm going to have to stay with this niche forever, and what if it's the wrong one? What you need to do is choose one, learn the skills, cut your teeth, develop the confidence, see that you can absorb the problems in that area, learn how to talk to people about it, watch how you build clients in that area, and then that's a very transferable skill if you want to move to a different niche later on. Really, there's hundreds of niches to choose from, and that dramatically narrows your field of competition, kind of speeds your path to success. And there's not as many coaches as people might imagine either. As of this recording, there's about 20,000 active coaches in North America, which if you do the math is about one for every 15,000 people. Now, not everybody wants a coach, of course, but the prevalence and value of coaching is really becoming more in the forefront as the years go by. Just kind of think of some of the reality shows like Biggest Loser or The Voice, or all of these shows have coaches, and you watch people get better and you see the interaction with the coach, and we're really talking about a trend that's on the upswing. But compare those 20,000 active coaches to hundreds of thousands of counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers and human resource workers, and you'll see that between the fewer number of coaches and the fact that there's so many niches to choose from, that you really don't have to be as concerned with competition as most people are going into it. So that's just another example of limitations that people put on themselves that they don't necessarily have to. Make sense?
Absolutely. And that is so true. In everything you can think of, there are people coaching. And even the weirdest things, like I have a friend who coaches people how to get in shape using tires, rocks, cinder blocks, logs, and pieces of wood, and all kinds of bizarre things. You want to know something crazy? Who do you think the target market is?
Some type of crazy macho musclehead. Maybe the same guys that take their kids to the monster truck rallies.
He has a ton of moms.
Really?
Yep.
No kidding.
Yep. And kids who are like 12, 14, 15, 16. Isn't that interesting? And when he told me about it, I was like, this is crazy. Yeah, he gets the young kids in there, the moms in there. I don't know why, but it works. And he has no degree in that. It's like it's all made up. I guess you could say, well, there's science to exercise, but you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Another coach is in-home childbirth. I met that person. They're doing really well. I mean, it really is infinite. It's only constrained with your imagination.
There really is. And there's so much information available online for free. Like, people are just blurting out what's on their mind in all these different areas. So you can just like go over to search.twitter.com or search on Facebook and look and see what people are posting. Like, let's say you're a chocolate addictions coach. You could go over to the Facebook search and search for I hate chocolate or I can't stop eating chocolate. It'll search the 900 million Facebook accounts to see who's posting, I can't stop eating chocolate. When you find those people, can't you just go and connect with them or offer them something or have a little audio or pamphlet or ebook that you can give them as a way of making an introduction? And that's just an example of how easy it can be to market to a very niched problem where you can search and identify who those people are. Besides being able to identify who they are, since they say everything on their mind, you can identify the nuances of what they want. They'll talk about what happened before they couldn't stop eating chocolate, what happened afterwards, what they were thinking. You look at their conversations with their friends about it. They'll tweet about it. They'll blog about it. It's just ridiculous how much good information you can get about a specific problem these days. But you have to be willing to pick that problem and stand up and say, yes, I am a chocolate addictions coach. Yes, I am a mental health supporter coach. Yes, I am a bowling coach, or whatever it happens to be. Well, what are the limitations do you think people put on themselves? Why do they think that they can't make money for helping people? I think sometimes people, they just feel guilty. They feel like maybe their religion taught them that they're only supposed to help people for free, or maybe their parents wouldn't think well of them for charging people to talk to them or help them out. What do you think about that?
I don't hear that. What I hear is just people don't believe they can do it. And I've been really cracking down on some of my friends who are soon to be ex-friends unless they change their attitudes. And I'm not even kidding. I have a friend, right? And I'll tell you, he could be a baseball coach, a batting cage coach, a fighting coach, fighting in terms of kickboxing and stuff, a whole bunch of things. 5 years ago, I told him to set up effectively a coaching practice for kids who wanted to play baseball and get into college and all this stuff 5 years ago. So this other guy in the last 2 years that he knew, and he quite frankly had told me, oh, that guy's a loser. That guy set up his coaching practice, and in 2 years, he set up the coaching practice. He has other coaches, and he just built his own batting cage.
Right.
And my friend, he has told me at least 250 reasons why he couldn't do it. Everything. I don't have the money. I don't do it. It's the wrong part. It's in Pennsylvania. It's this, that, the other thing. And the big takeaway, if people could listen, is to this, is that there's no limit. So don't train your brain to think of why it won't work. Train your brain to think of how to make it work.
Right.
And that's the big problem. I don't find people say, well, I'm opposed to making money. They just say, oh, no one will pay for that. Nope, they wouldn't. Glenn, this is crazy. I've talked to people about coaching in the same market, the same niche in two different areas. One person told me that people in their area didn't have enough money. Another person told me they were in New Jersey and they said, oh my God, these people have too much money. They wouldn't pay. They had too much money and it's above them. In the same niche.
I know. Speaking about the local market objection, yes, it's nice to be able to coach people in person, but because the audience opens up so much wider and because when you focus on a specific problem, it's easier to reach people all over the world, the whole internet is open to you to connect with people. There's people in Australia that have problems too. People in Australia who have spouses with bipolar or some type of mental health problem that, David, you can coach them, and I think you do. There's people in New Zealand, and there's people in England, and people in countries that speak other languages if you happen to speak Spanish or Portuguese or Chinese or Japanese. The whole world is open to you. There's no reason to limit yourself to thinking, I have to coach locally, because also when you coach locally, you kind of need to have an office, and that starts to create some rent and overhead that you don't really want to have in the beginning. You'd rather put that money and time into getting the word out and into your training and studying and certification and things like that. I think people have all sorts of reasons why they think they can't do it. I don't have enough time. Well, could you make a half an hour a day?
I have a different counter for that because I just heard that from my friend. I don't have enough time. What's your plan? That's what I asked him. Well, what do you mean? So I'm like a coach to him. Obviously, I've not been doing too well with my life coaching part is not doing well for this guy since it's been 5 years. I said, well, what are you going to do? You're getting older. Every year, all I do is hear you complain. So what's your other plan? You say you don't have time, you don't have this, you don't have the money. What are you going to do? And it was really this conversation, I think, in the last week that got him to say, yeah, you know what? I got to make time.
Sometimes a critical question at the right time like that can make all the difference in someone's life because people actually do walk around not knowing they need to have a plan. It's like they're living life on a horse without reins, just letting the horse take them wherever the horse feels like going. When you intervene at that moment and you can ask them a critical question like, well, what is your plan? What are you going to do? How are you going to make this better? A lot of people inside, they go, wow, I guess I should have a plan. It's easy to kind of make fun of them, but we've all experienced some of that kind of living unconsciously at some point in our lives in various areas. So becoming more conscious is always a part of life's process. But one of the great things about coaching, what I'm trying to point out, is you can make a dramatic difference in people's lives when you catch them at the right time with the right questions, phrased in the right way. And sometimes it's the really tough love that David presents. Sometimes it's a quiet kind of company keeping that makes them feel cared about or loved if they didn't feel cared about or loved. And sometimes it's a threat of withdrawing your time and attention that they'll be willing to change for. So everybody's different, but you can have a dramatic impact on people. Here's another limitation, David. People say, not only do I think I can do it, do I think I can get paid? Is it believable? But am I worthy? Am I a worthy person to help others and get paid for it? And my counter to that is that it's the wrong question. If you're willing to be someone who stands up and studies the specific problems and says, I am the expert in this area or an expert in this area, and I'm willing to pour my heart and soul into paying attention to you and helping you fix this problem, and the question really isn't, are you worthy? The question is, are they worthy of you? Because bad clients can suck up a lot of time and energy and morale. And when you get good at this, and if you do what we tell you, you really should get good at this, you should have more clients than you can handle sooner than you think that it will be. And I know that sounds like, well, gee, that's a good problem to have, or maybe we're selling to you or something like that. And I guess we are selling a little bit. But I really think that people have to guard their practices and be very careful about taking people on who are going to be very difficult to deal with and not grateful and mostly complainers. And so I think that the real question is, are these people worthy of you? And I think when you start asking that question, your whole attitude changes, your whole perspective changes, and that limitation just melts away. Make sense?
Yeah, and I want to add to that. That's where the certification comes in. And I don't make a dime off of Glenn's certification. What I've realized, and me just telling people to just do it, there's a platform they need, and that's why certifications make sense, because there's just a lot of the stuff you talk about and a whole bunch of other stuff that gets you this foundational knowledge that a lot of people really do need. And it is true. I know that a lot of people just jump into coaching and they don't have that foundational knowledge, especially about like who not to take on and who to cut off. They're going to go crazy half the time.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you saying it. The other reason that the certification and training is important, there's a couple of reasons. One is that inevitably coaches make mistakes in the beginning, and it can be a very isolating profession. So if you just go out there by yourself and you don't really have someone who's worked with thousands of clients and really made a living out of this and supervises people, if you don't have that kind of expert feedback in the beginning, it could be kind of disheartening, because even though, just like David, when you're coaching bipolar supporters, there's really just a handful of principles that distinguish success from failure. Tell people to stop being so timid, get them to a psychiatrist, give them a couple of strategies for getting them to a psychiatrist, kind of motivate them, make it toxic for them to keep doing what they're doing, and just make the status quo toxic so they move forward. Like, you figured out there's a couple of principles. There's really just a handful of principles that coaches need to know in order to be successful. But if you don't have someone to feed those principles to you and point out to you when you're varying from those principles and motivate you to do what sometimes is not human nature, like it's only human nature to ask, gee, I don't think I'm worthy. It's only human nature to take anybody who knocks on your door. It's only human nature to just pick up the phone and answer when a prospective client is calling. All those things are wrong from the perspective of a coach who really wants to build their practice. Going through a formal certification and training for a few months at a very reasonable price and getting feedback from not only master coaches, but also from your peers and looking what they struggle with and having the opportunity to observe other people making mistakes and getting gentle feedback to correct them. It's a learning environment you really can't replicate. You just can't replicate that on your own. The other reason is that when you adopt a niched coaching philosophy, you wind up building a referral base more quickly, because let's say there's 12 other people in your class, and it's a very interactive class, so people really get to know each other well, and we do exercises together, and we practice, and we interview each other, and give each other feedback, and all that kind of thing. Let's say that one of them is an adoption coach, another one is a chocolate addictions coach, and another one is a general weight loss coach, and another one is a hiking coach, right? You all get to know each other's specialties. You get to know each other's elevator pitches. You get to know each other's points of difference and real reasons that it's good to work with you as opposed to anybody else in the world. You start referring to each other. It's in some ways easier to go out and look for clients for someone else than it is to look for clients for yourself. So you start to build a referral base. You make connections with people who really become a support network for you for the rest of your coaching career, and if not your life. And you get the training and certification to develop confidence quickly. And as compared to other certifications, we're a lot more affordable. I think we're a lot more credible. If you're interested in having your clients look to see where you got certified, we have a board of people from very prestigious universities and organizations and people from Yale and Harvard. Not that that's really the most critical thing. I mean, I think that's really more about image for clients that don't know you. Once the clients know you, they really shouldn't care about those kind of things. But when you kind of need some credibility to fall back on, it's nice to know that it's there. And we have a guarantee that's unmatched by most, if not all, of our competitors. Now head on over to becomearealcoach.com and read about the details of our program and what we have to offer and what our guarantee is. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find the training elsewhere. I know that there's a lot of choices out there. I know that people are comparing and contrasting a lot of things, but I think if you listen to the kinds of things you hear in this audio and some of the future audios to come and the cheat sheets and transcripts, and you just kind of look at the depth of free materials that we give, you might want to ask yourself, well, if they give so much to me for free, how much more are they going to give me in the certification itself? Whereas, do you believe that the other organizations who are mostly just doing selling for free, do you believe that they're going to suddenly turn generous when they get into the certification and training? I don't think so. This is really a mission for us. It's kind of what I was born and bred to do. I come from a family of 17 therapists and counselors and social workers, and what they didn't know at the time was that after people's symptoms resolved, they actually kind of kept them. They called it therapy, but things really changed to coaching. Like, goal setting and resolving obstacles to those goals and kind of moving forward as opposed to healing. I'm kind of bored and bred with this. I'm bored and bred with the helping profession in my soul. And this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I really want to give people. This is what I want to share and spare others from having to suffer with, because there's a lot of simple obstacles that can prevent people from succeeding, and I really know how to teach people how to overcome them, and that's why I'm willing to guarantee it. And I guess that's all I really have to say about this. Excuse me for being immodest and maybe touting my own horn for a little bit. But David, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
One thing I wanted to say, to go backwards a little bit, because I think one objection, because I really want people to get into coaching. They really should. The world needs coaches. One thing that people have been saying to me when I've been telling people to get into coaching, they say, oh, there's so much free stuff on the internet. And that's great, because what's happening is there's so much free stuff on the internet that somebody needs to ferret through and tell someone the bottom line. Like, my dad has a whole bunch of medical problems. I wish I could go call a coach who would just, not even a doctor, that would tell me, read this article, go to that guy, think this way, because it's very confusing. And the fact that there's so much more information is only going to help your coaching business.
What I tell people is that, first of all, if the answers to people's problems were as readily available in the free information online as you thought that they were, then the average number of searches when someone logged onto Google would be 1, because they'd search for what they wanted and they'd find the answer and they would read it and they would be done. But it's not true. The average number is between 5 and 7 in the last study that I saw, so there's a tremendous amount of frustration online. People don't like to search, they like to solve. What everybody really wants is like a loving uncle or an aunt or older brother or older sister to sit down with them and say, Joe, this is the way it is. You're having this problem. This is what you need to do. And I know because I've done it and I've helped all these other people do it, and you can really trust me. And if you have any questions about it, why don't you ask me and I'll explain it to you. People really prefer, most people, some very erudite, educated people prefer to lock themselves in the library and figure it out for themselves. But for the most part, the masses prefer to be coached. They prefer to have an intimate communication with another human being that they trust, get the answers, solve the problems, and then ask themselves, well, what else can this person solve for me? And that's the last thing I wanted to mention, because what I forgot to mention when we were talking about niching yourself was that when you work with a given client, let's say I'm a chocolate addictions coach. And let's say I work with a person and I help them get off chocolate and they lose 30 pounds and they're really happy. Most people think that, well, that's the end. And for some clients it is. Some clients that's all they really wanted, and maybe talk to them a little bit about maintenance. You have a couple of maintenance sessions. But most people, when you solve a very significant problem for them, and you did it in the context of a constructive, communicative, somewhat intimate relationship, it's only natural for them to think, well, what else you got? What else can you help me with? And that's when you turn to the different areas of their life and you ask them to describe other problems and you rely on your more general problem-solving skills. And you can kind of evolve to being more of the life coach that everybody seems to want to be. It's just that the way that you bring people in and the initial problems that you solve are really more focused and short-term. But if you keep at it, you wind up with a practice full of people that talk to you about all sorts of things and really give you the opportunity to help them with their lives in amazing ways, amazing ways. And it enriches you. I used to think the best thing about being a coach was going to be that I could just live where I wanted to and work when I wanted to from wherever I wanted to on my own schedule and make a really good income, that kind of thing. But I think really the best thing about being a coach are the stories that get inside you. Because in the course of listening to people about the particular problem that they have, they tell you things they'll tell nobody else in the world. And you hear how they have solved other problems in their life in ways that nobody else has solved them. And it makes you stronger and stronger and stronger. And it just makes you feel more solid inside and kind of better about what you're doing. And then better able to help other people with those stories. So I just think it's an amazing profession. I don't understand why more people aren't doing it. I think the limitations and roadblocks people put up are mostly of their own making. Like Pogo said, I've met the enemy and he is me. She is me. And I really would hope that people would, at the very, very least, go over to becomearealcoach.com and have a look at what we have to offer. It's guaranteed. It's affordable. In just a few months, you can be a certified professional coach with the ability to build a thriving practice from anywhere, guaranteed. David, anything else that I left out?
Yeah, I want to tell you one last success story, too. I coached a lady. She actually had bipolar disorder, so she became a coach for people that wanted to have green grass.
Really?
Yeah. People shouldn't think that's crazy because there's a lot of people who want green grass. You think about it, right? I mean, you don't really want yellow grass.
No, and it impacts the value of your house if you're reselling it, and it impacts the value of the neighborhood houses, and people bother you if you don't have green grass, and there's a lot of people out there with lawns.
Right.
That's a pretty big market. That's a very interesting area. And so she was successful?
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, well, David, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the interview. I hope you'll come back sometime.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Okay. Head on over to becomearealcoach.com, everybody. Becomearealcoach.com. Thanks.
In just 12 weeks, you can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. My name is Dr. Glenn Livingston, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about taking your coaching dreams a lot more seriously, about getting the right certification and training, and about developing the confidence to deliver stellar results time after time so your clients will accomplish their goals, others will notice, and get referred back to you. I'll hope you forgive my modesty while we talk, because my wife and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other program on the market. I've personally worked with over 1,000 clients and supervised dozens of coaches and therapists, sharing some literally thousands of groups and team-building workshops. And together we've sold more than $20 million in consulting. We've had our previous work, research, and theories covered in major media like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, ABC and CBS Radio, the Wall Street Journal, New York Daily News, and many more. So we have the confidence in our ability to train and certify you as a coach and give you the know-how to build the practice of your dreams. In fact, we're so confident, we're willing to guarantee it right through the end of the very last class. If you don't feel our training was your best choice for any reason, just show us you attended at least 3/4 of the classes and did at least 75% of the assignments. We will refund every penny that you paid. When you compare our experience, guarantee, and more affordable than most pricing, we think your choice will be clear. But if you're like most coaches, you're probably a little skeptical, maybe a lot. You see a lot of limitations and obstacles, and I'd like to talk about them with you because most of them are self-imposed. For example, you might think it's not really possible to earn a living as a professional coach. Maybe you think there's too much competition. But did you know that as of this recording, there were only about 20,000 active coaches in North America? That's less than one coach for every 15,000 people. Of course, not every one of those 15,000 people is in the market for a coach, but coaching has become ever more acceptable and interesting thanks to reality shows like The Biggest Loser, The Voice, dancing shows, singing shows, et cetera, et cetera. Every one of the contestants gets a coach, and the audience gets to see the value firsthand as they progress. More importantly, most coaches ignore the immense value of niching. There's literally hundreds of coaching niches to choose from, and when you do niche, you dramatically lower your competition and raise your odds of success. For example, where there may be 20,000 active coaches overall in North America, how many adoption coaches do you think there are? What about coaches who specialize in chocolate addiction? By the way, I could use one of those. Family business, academic achievement, and you don't have to marry any of these niches either. You just try one on to size, learn the skills, and transfer them to whatever suits your fancy later on. But here's another self-imposed limitation. Many people think it's simply not possible to earn a living as a coach.
Well, you can visit becomearealcoach.com
to see detailed studies which suggest the average active coach earns about $55,000 per year. Of course, there are coaches who make a lot more and coaches who make a lot less. And it would be unreasonable to assume just getting certified will automatically give you this income. Your income as a coach will depend upon many things, including the niche you choose. For example, working with affluent couples to help them adopt is likely to be more lucrative than helping disabled veterans adjust to life at home. Not any more meaningful, fulfilling, or soulful, but definitely more profitable. The environment you work in will also influence your income. Private practice versus a salaried employee, etc. The number of hours you choose to fill. Nobody says you have to work full time. The fees that you're comfortable charging. There's a lot of coaches out there that don't want to charge as much as they really could charge. The business model that you choose. In other words, individual coaching versus selling books, tapes, seminars, groups, and events for more leveraged and passive income. The seriousness of the problem that you specialize in. How desperate are your clients to solve it? How meaningful and valuable is the solution? For example, it's easier to earn more as an adoption coach than a yoga coach for this very reason. And your income also depends upon how much effort you put into attracting clients. But most importantly, in our experience, your income is related to your coaching confidence and ability to produce stellar results for your clients. Or maybe the obstacle stopping you from taking your coaching dreams to the next level is wondering whether you need a professional background in therapy or counseling. But you don't, because coaching isn't therapy. So you won't get involved in diagnosing, treating, or curing any type of mental illness. And we'll teach you how to clearly draw the line and skillfully refer clients who require a licensed professional. When in doubt, refer it out is our motto. Coincidentally, many of these professionals who you refer to can become a good resource of referrals back into your network. Maybe you're not sure if you're worthy of coaching. Maybe you think you don't have enough experience, or you're just not credible enough to coach people professionally, or that you don't have the expertise. When people tell me this, I tell them that they're asking the wrong question. See, if you're willing to put your heart and soul into helping someone, if you're willing to give them your undivided attention on a regular or semi-regular basis until they reach their goal, if you're willing to make them a priority in your life in exchange for a reasonable payment, then the real question is, you should be asking, are these clients worthy of me? Because you see, you've only got a limited amount of time, energy, and love to give these people, so you've got to protect your practice. The real question is, are they worthy of you? Maybe you don't think you have the time to become a certified professional coach, but if you can make 4 or 5 hours a week, which is under an hour a day, for just a few months, you can definitely become a certified professional coach in our program. And there are many, many ways to start a coaching practice on a part-time schedule. We know most coaches have very busy lives even before they begin. And because we actually like coaches who are out there living real lives, we work hard to accommodate them. Coaching is more about experience and the desire to share and spare than it is about book knowledge. Maybe you think you can't afford it. But our program is much more affordable than most other live interactive certification programs, and we've got financing options to suit any budget. Besides, coaching is one of the least expensive businesses to start because you can work with people all over the world via telephone, Skype, and the internet. So there's really no need for office space, rent, or other overhead. And we'll show you how to make a safe transition plan so you can carefully plan your move from another job with a great deal of confidence when the time is right. Because you are the product, this is another reason why coaching is easier to get into and less expensive, because you are the product. Many of the traditional costs associated with starting a business, like inventory or research and development, production cost, they just simply disappear. So, at the risk of appearing self-serving, a better question than, can you really afford to do this, is, can you really afford not to do it? Finally, perhaps you think you're going to be a great coach, but you're too allergic to marketing to do anything about it. And if you feel this way, it's likely because you've been taught the wrong things about marketing. You're probably thinking of used car salesmen, cold calling, constant rejection, and constant lies. And nobody's taken the time to find out what marketing methods really suit your personality. Remember, Sharon and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other certification program on the market. That means we've got the flexibility to help virtually any coach who wants it bad enough. You can check out our website at becomearealcoach.com for more details about our personal biographies. But for now, just trust me when I say if you don't like public speaking, there's no problem. If you hate making cold calls, there's no problem. If you can't even stand the idea of making a website, there's no problem because we'll show you how to market in a way that's comfortable for you. Now, by this point, you may actually be wondering what happens in the certification program itself. Again, you can visit becomearealcoach.com to read the details, but in a nutshell, our program is largely about the experience of being a coach and not the academic. Each week, you'll meet live with your instructor and your peers and have the experience of practicing that week's coaching or business development lesson with everybody in the group. You'll get detailed feedback from your master coach instructor, and you'll get additional feedback from your peers. And here's an important benefit most people don't think of. You'll get a chance to observe and learn from the other coaches in training. Then, after each event, you'll download a brief set of materials which prepare you for the following week and include an action challenge. So in short, first you practice with your peers, then you watch, read, or listen to us describe what you just experienced, and finally you do it on your own outside of class so you can integrate the learning. Practice, study, then do. It's really that simple in less than an hour a day. There's quite a bit more to know.
So you'll want to visit becomearealcoach.com as soon as you can.
But the most important thing to remember is that in just 12 weeks, you really can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability, and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. Head on over to becomearealcoach.com now. Classes fill quickly, so please book your slot today if you're at all interested. Thanks.